Beginning in less than 1 minute. You did not show up. I'm just going to begin. Welcome everyone to session 2 of Media Over QUIC. It's the 6th of November, and this session, as always, is being recorded because UP is the mascot of 2 different teams here in Montreal. He gets to be on the slide twice, and you see here today he's pictured with 2 gentlemen who are almost as handsome as UP is. This is the IETF Notewell. It is newly revised as of this IETF meeting, so if you read it a long time ago, it might be a good time to reread it. It is about proper conduct as an IETF participant and the intellectual property implications of you being here. By now you know all this. Those of you who are in the room and using the full MeetEcho client, I ask you to mute your speaker so that we don't have feedback effects. Those of you who are remote, if you plan to speak, it is best if you use headphones to avoid various feedback effects. I think everyone knows by now that you can press the button at the bottom of your screen if you're using the full client, or the top of your screen, well, or somewhere in the raised hand button to enter the queue to speak. If you are remote, you probably want to unmute about a second or so before you're going to speak due to some latency. I'm not sure why we aren't on the chairs and or the speaker are not on the MeetEcho video feed, but hopefully that'll be rectified soon. Thank you, Yaqui, for agreeing to scribe today. This is what we talked about yesterday. And here's the agenda for today. We had a late bash. The Colin was originally scheduled to talk about his privacy pass draft, but instead he and Ian have had something of a breakthrough in extensibility and have decided to present that instead. So they will go in at 10 o'clock right after Will is done. All right, with that, I'd like to invite Mike to talk about how the hackathon went.
All right, so this is the interop report. This is what the spreadsheet looks like as of just before this meeting. It's a lot to look at, so we can come back and I can zoom in. But there's a lot more color here than there has been in the past. So I am very happy with this.
Can you speak into the mic a bit?
Sure. A couple observations. People seem to like having more time to go deeper. We targeted the same draft version at the Interop Hackathon for our most recent interim, as well as for this meeting. And we were able to achieve much better results because we had more time to kind of work through bugs, go away, fix things, come back, do it again. But of course, there are trade-offs in kind of having more time on each draft. We want to have good API stability, and we want to not be exposed to a ton of wire image churn. Everybody likes to complain about these things, but at the same time, we want to finish the base draft. And that means like closing issues, addressing things, tightening up the wire image compression before we get to the end of this process, so that it's not changing after. So maybe that's something worth discussing a bit. Are these things actually opposed? Are there ways that we can get what everybody wants? Finish the base draft, make progress on things, while also not having too much pain. The other thing I wanted to mention is we have some new tooling. So at the interim in Toronto, we talked about some things that we might try to improve our interop testing situation. And a couple of those things have been implemented. So one of them is a new tool, MOQ test, that Alan created. And another is an implementation of the QLog MOQT events extension that I have added to my relay server. So Alan's thing gives you this nice readout. Maybe he can speak to the details more at the end. But it's very neat. It runs through a bunch of different permutations, uses the MOQ test publisher as kind of the basis for all of these tests. So there's a MOQ test draft that describes basically a way of using namespaces to request certain types of tracks. And you can use that to test a lot of different permutations, which is neat. And then for the QLog, MOQT event enhanced QLogs, this is something that there's a draft that Lucas and Mathis have been working on. I think Lucas has some time to talk about that later. But I implemented a version of this and did the thing that I think Christian might have suggested, and expose those logs in a way that you can fetch your own logs if you know your initial client connection ID. The other big news is by having more time to kind of do the same draft again, it also allows us to build higher. So there was some actual media interop testing that Jordi and Suhas worked on. And I think this is a demo. Let's see, is it gonna play? There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what you are seeing is the web encoder that we implemented at Meta. MOQ encoders is a JavaScript application that is sending its encoding video and sending it in real time to a QUIC client that is a native client, if I'm not mistaken, in macOS, and sending a perfectly smooth video over an oxygen relay with a latency, end-to-end latency of 290 milliseconds. So if you have any questions, so Suhas is here, so thank you. And I'm here, so happy to answer them. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Any questions?
Lovely. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for being on time. Next up is Will to talk about Warp.
Right, good afternoon. This is Will Law from Akamai. I'm going to very quickly go over some of the updates and the issues for two drafts, Warp and Carp. I'm not going to give a summary of Warp. I usually do for those new in the audience. Warp is where media actually gets delivered over MOQ transport. So it handles all the complexity of describing, publishing, and controlling that media. Next slide, please.
You have slide control.
Oh, I do. Slide clicker. There we go. Thank you. So the PRs that were merged since Toronto that are significant, we added something called an event timeline track. This is a JSON document that holds a series of records. It's very simple in its structure, but it's designed to be very flexible and is designed to try to accommodate all the various metadata uses that we might want to accompany our core audio and video transmission. Each record has two fields. It has an index field and a data field. The index field is one of three constrained types. It indexes by either location, which is group ID and object ID, by media presentation time, or by warp clock time. And these are the three indices we tend to use in most media applications. The data type is defined by the application and is defined elsewhere outside of the warp spec. To tell you what data type it is, when you declare the track, there's an event timeline type that has a namespace, and you put a name in there. And your decoder your player has to understand this event timeline type in order to correctly parse the data. On the right-hand side, I showed two examples. The one in red is a sports data feed. It's indexing based on warp clock time. So this could have been a third-party service providing the score. Its data is a JSON object that's got many fields, and the structure of that is defined outside of Warp. The second one lower down is another event timeline track. This one is how a drone might report its GPS coordinates while it was filming video. This indexes by MOQ transport location, so group ID, object ID, and the data field here is simply two numbers specifying the GPS coordinates. And so these are hypothetical situations. We actually used this structure in CARP to add a SAP type track, and I'll get to that in the next presentation. So I think it's a good start, but we're interested in feedback if this is not flexible enough or if there's metadata types that you don't think can be accommodated by this format. I was going to say next slide, but that's to myself. So at the same time, we also changed the media timeline, which used to be a CSV file. We changed that over to JSON just so that we're consistent across our spec. Our catalog's JSON, event timeline is JSON, media timeline is JSON. So the media timeline now purely describes the audio and video content produced by the original publisher. And it describes the history. So if you're only playing the live edge, you don't care about the media timeline. But if you do care about seeking back or generating a UI interface that shows the amount of time and content that's available in the past, then you can subscribe to this media timeline track. It's a JSON document. It's simply a series of numbers. The first one is the media time. The second is the location, group ID, object ID. And then the third is warp clock time. We removed metadata from the CSV specifically because we want to make this track hyper efficient at describing the history. And then the client in the catalog, it's told about all the other metadata tracks that might be available. It can subscribe to them as it needs them. Then PR60, this is an open PR. This was an issue raised at Toronto. We decided we wanted to rename Warp. We had a long issue, so we've come up with a new proposal that's trying to accommodate all the various input that's been given on this issue. So a URL now for Warp, and it's a URL because it's a resource. Like we're actually giving an address to a resource, a server plus a piece of content. It's MOQT plus authority path and query. Right? The URL has to conform with RFC 3986. The protocol is MOQT. This is because we don't want users, if we put HTTPS there, which would work for web transport, people might be confused that they can give it and expect an HTTP response, which is not the case. So we're going with MOQT. We have specific instructions in the spec for if you're connecting with QUIC, it works directly, but if you're connecting with web transport, what you need to do to convert it to an HTTPS URL. The authority is required. It holds the host and the optional port. This is how you connect to the service that's going to give you your connection to the relay. The default port is 443. The path is optional. If it's there, it gives additional information that the relay might want to use in initializing, accepting, or even configuring your connection. The query component is also optional. And within it, we have certain reserved keys that we use to communicate information. You can also supply your own application-specific keys. Importantly, the query does not get sent to the relay at connection time. So if you want information for the relay, you put it into the path. Everything in the query log is for the player. So there's a nice separation of concerns there. I give a little colored example at the bottom, but we have more specific examples coming up. So of the reserved query keys, we have a few of them. We have namespace and track name. Namespace we need because everything we do in MOQ transport, it's currently, when you subscribe, you need the namespace as the name as separate entities. There's an initiative right now to try to merge them. I think it's the third time we've been through that one. I still support merging them. I think we could do it with Simplify. Conveniently, catalog is a reserved name in Warp. It has to be called catalogs. Therefore, we don't need to describe it. If you want to point at a catalog, you don't need to give the track name. But if you want to point at something that's not a catalog, you need to give the actual track name. Then we define 3 range modifiers. In other words, here's some content. We want you to play a subclip of it. And that subclip can be specified in terms of walk clock time, media time, or location, MOQ transport group and ID tuples. We also define a reserved key for C4M, which is a token type. We're happy to do this, another reserved key for privacy pass or other auth schemes that we might want here. So here's at the top, here's some example of range defining query logs. The first is a walk clock time range, then a media time range, then a location range. I think those are quite simple. Below that example 1, we got a URL pointing at a catalog. We don't need to specify the track name because it is catalog. Secondly, we have pointing at a non-catalog track, this case called video. Then we have pointing at a range, a subclip of a catalog. And then lastly, it's pointing at a catalog along with a token. That's a real world token that I use. So that gives an indication of the URL length that we might be dealing with in the real world. So before I go on to the next subject, I don't think we have much time for discussion today, but this is a PR that's up there. I believe it is a reasonable approach to addressing warp content. And bear in mind, this is for warp specifically. It's not a generic mechanism to address any MOQ transport resource. We have specific attributes. We have catalogs of warp, and this is a scheme to allow us to access warp content. And I see, I'm looking in the notes here very quickly. Sorry, I missed it. Yes, this is not a MOQ transport scheme. We're using MOQT to separate the fact that this is not an HTTP URL, and that was one of the issues arise. Ted, for Q.
So I apologize. I meant to get to you earlier in the week with this. I do think this probably does need to be renamed because it is warp specific rather than fully capable for WarpT. And there's also some stuff you and I probably need to talk about making sure that you can go from the web transport version to this version mechanically without having to have somebody to do something. But I think this is, generally speaking, heading in the right direction. I think if you rename it, warp, and we take care of a couple of small things, I think this is definitely going in the right way.
That would be great. And I did send you some meeting times earlier for this week, so please check your email, and I'm happy to talk through it.
My apologies for that.
Hey, no worries. Okay, and let's go to the next issue. Oh, is there any more questions? No. So we also had it at Toronto. We decided we want to rename Warp. We put up various name proposals to be democratic. We created a poll. It was an anonymous poll, so there's no bias, except I do probably have a clue who wrote, "I don't know, it all sucks," but I won't mention names. So there were 2 sort of primary winners to this poll. There was MOQ streaming format was the one, and behind that MOQT media streaming format. So I honored the winner of the poll but I did change MOQ to MOQT. The logic behind that was that MOQT is the actual name of our spec that we're operating over. There is no draft for MOQ. Now, an objection has been noted, so I'm summarizing it here, that MOQ is mentioned in our charter and the warp name should therefore be MOQ streaming format. There's a picture of that shown at the bottom on the left. I have a different view, which is that MOQ is an umbrella term for all the tech relevant to MOQT. I know Media Over QUIC is explicitly mentioned in our charter. I think we need to revise our charter, and I'm going to open an issue for that. Charter was written 3 years ago. We have built something that's far more flexible and then that is intentionally payload agnostic. And I think we need to update our charter to reflect that. So if MOQ is the agnostic term, then I think MOQ transport is the transport that carries these agnostic properties, and MOQT streaming format can be the name. This is obviously a contentious issue. No one cares about the color of the bike shed until you actually paint the shed a color, and then suddenly people care. So this is the name proposal here. I'm open to more debate on it. There's a PR open number 71. If you have opinions, please get on that. Unless there's opinions in the room, I think not. Okay, so that was the end of Warp, or maybe MSF, media streaming, MOQ streaming format.
Any comments?
Okay.
Now would be the time to approach. I'll load the slides for CARP. If I can find them. There they are.
So Chris Lemons, I'm sorry, Media Over MOQ didn't get the votes. And Ali, I agree. And we're never going to call this thing MOQ streaming format. We're just going to call it MSF. If you look at HTTP, no one even goes around saying hypertext transfer protocol. We don't say HTTP live streaming. So it's the acronym that's important. Thanks, I'm too slow to get the mom joke. Right, CARP, next section. I've got 7 minutes left. This should be easy. Little updates on CARP. So CARP is a CMAF extension to Warp. CMAF, or ISO-based media file format, a constriction on that, is the most commonly used media type around us today. So for broadest ability for MOQ to start transporting this type of media, we want a specification that tells you how to stream it. One aspect of ISO-based media and CMAF is the SAP type, the stream access point type, different ways, a guarantee of how you can join a track that's in progress. We had a specification for this in Warp. We had the metadata type, and we defined a namespace and a construct to describe that. When we changed in Warp the media timeline to remove it, we have to add now another way to describe the SAP type. Our preferred way of doing that is the event track. So we've created a specific event track. This one is called SAP type timeline track, and it inherits all the features of the timeline. It has a packaging value of event timeline. It has an event type, and I created a little reverse DNS name here. I do have a question to the group. I'm calling it org IETF MOQ CARP SAP. I don't know if we have the rights to do that. Is there a central registry here, or do we need to go to an external body? So this is a placeholder for now. I'm open to guidance on a way we can register this. I'm hesitant to go to another IANA table. I think there's much more flexibility to just create a name that's reasonably unique. We don't have an urgent problem, I don't believe. I think we can easily avoid having to go to a central registry for this. The other type is location. And it's just a JSON array with 2 fields. It's easier. Let me show you an example. So here we have the SAP type timeline. So it's an array of records. We got a group 0, object 0. It's got SAP type of 2 and an EPT of 0. And then 60 frames later, we have a SAP type of 3 and a media presentation time of 2100. And thanks, Yaqui, for the text on the left, which actually describes what's happening in the media world for what we were representing in the timeline track. Again, this has been merged, but if there's issues with it, let me know. And then we also want to rename CARP. People disliked the name CARP even more than they dislike Warp, which is fine. So depending what we choose for warp, we can just throw CMAF in. So something like CMAF compliant MOQ streaming format, or MOQ CMAF streaming format, MCSF, CMSF. I think MCSF is a little easier on the tongue. However, someone sarcastically replied to the prior naming poll with the name Fire. And I actually think it was done in jest, but I really like this name for a streaming format. I think the opportunity to say how you're streaming it and you get to say it's on fire is unique. So I'm going to actually propose a name of Fire, and you're welcome to comment on that one, but I like it. We'll go through a similar naming exercise for CARP. Yes, we'll have a brand engineering task force. Okay, and then for adoption, there's an ongoing adoption call right now. There's been various supporters on the list. Thank you for that. I think we probably have sufficient to get adoption, but if you have opinions on adoption, then now is the time to express them before the chairs act on that. With that, I thank the chairs for the time. It's the end of the presentation.
Yeah, so just to remark on that, the adoption call is ongoing. It will end it started with Monday, so it will be another 1.5 weeks. So please comment on it.
Mo here. Just one quick question on the SAP types. Is there going to be any guidance about MOQ object model usage, whether or not your groups should map to the to all of the independent, random access points in the track? Or it seemed weird to me that you actually have join points in the middle of your groups, whereas MOQ is supposed to kind of bias towards the groups are the join points. So what is there going to be any rationale for how somebody constructs their tracks?
Yes, there is. So firstly, to be clear, already in Warp, if you read it, it tells you that the start, every group should basically align with a GOP, or at least with a GOP. So the start of every group must be an independent access point, which is typically a type 2 access point as described there. And that's the default. So you don't need to provide the SAP type track if that's what you're doing. And that's what everyone who's built a CARP solution so far has done that. It's the norm. But then there's the opportunity to introduce more sophisticated access points, which are midway within a segment. So you're guaranteed to be able to join at a segment, but you might have different joining properties midway through a segment. And that's really what we want to describe here. The default one, we don't need to constantly describe. It's any variance from that we do want to describe. Okay, so there won't be any guidance about which way to go, about whether you should construct your group on every access. There is guidance in the spec right now. So I think Yekui is going to explain it in a moment here.
Yeah, Yekui Wang. So your first question on whether there is a clear indication of what kind of random set point go to which type. So in the ISO-based media file format, there is clear definition. And in the Part 15, the language-based file format that has all kind of random set point in AVC, HVC, VVC mapped to the set types and so on. I guess my main question is whether or not an application should only construct its groups with a specific SAP type, or whether it should construct its groups using any possible SAP type. Is that going to be any kind of guidance in CARP or not? Yes, is it groups mapped to SAP types? Sorry, we have a delay. Finish your sentence, Mo. Is there going to be guidance that groups should map to a specific SAP type, and then other SAP types can be interspersed within that, or there's going to be no guidance at all? It is clearly said. Currently, the work practice says, okay, for group start, you have to be the highest subtype is 2. So you can be subtype 1 or 2, and then in between, in middle of group, you could have subtype 3. Yeah.
So just a clarification question. I'm not aware of CMAF as much. So is the SAP type 3, is it a different, you represent it as a different subgroup, or is it a random object inside a group?
It's a random object. It's not random, but it's an object inside a group. It's not within a different subgroup.
Does that require that MOQ API should expose a way to join at mid groups as join points?
No, it's not
I'm trying to
required.
understand. Like my high level question is that how is that related to MOQ object model or the API?
The MOQ
Jim, we're
object
gonna-
model is just describing objects and groups, right? This is mapping media to that object model. And CARP tells you that you must map your CMAF-based segments to groups. And you can, and there's those, as Yekwi just mentioned, the group. In other words, object 0 of the group must include an SAP type, an access point type of 1 or 2. But any of the other objects within that group, which is also with mid-GOP, can have an additional access type of 3.
All right, gentlemen, we're at time. We're gonna have to continue this online, unless if you have 2 sentences, Yekwi, if you want to say
2
something.
sentences. So regarding your question on subgroup, so that would be a completely orthogonal. If you do have subgroups, then those subtype 2, subtype 3 in the middle would also be like subgroup 0, because that is have those temporal scalability 0.
All right, thank you, Will. We're scrambling the order a little bit for various reasons. So next up will be Colin talking about secure objects.
Thank you. We have 15 minutes total for this, right? Is it? Yeah, cool. Okay. Okay, so secure objects. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the changes that have happened, and then we got a great review from Magnus, and we'll talk. We'll probably have enough time for maybe 1 or 2 of the most important issues he raises. We'll see where we get. So let me jump right into this. Just remind you, this is not a replacement for anything in CMAF. This is a alternative to be used in other type of cases where you aren't doing CMAF and you're trying to do end-to-end encryption type things. And a big part of the design is around minimizing the bandwidth for audio in particular, where the encrypted versions of the data often has a substantially higher band. The encryption takes more space than the actual data you're sending itself. So this is very much modeled after, it basically uses the S-frame design. It doesn't invent any new schemes, and it primarily reuses the S-frame design with some minor tweaks. So one of the things is that this is designed to work with AEAD ciphers. Most of our modern cipher suites, particularly TLS and the QUIC stuff that we're basing on top of, is exclusively AEAD ciphers going forward. So the important part about this is, and part of why the IETF chose this class of type of ciphers, is that you do the integrity protection stuff that's going to give you, to know that data wasn't tampered with. You're going to do it at the same time that you do the encryption all in one step. And it's been found in practice that this really eliminates lots of ways that you can get your security wrong and crypto wrong, and has a better success rate with implementations of not having bad leaks in this type of area. So since last IETF, actually 2 IETFs back, the big changes happen here is immutable extensions landed in MOQ. So we've those are down in the base transport draft, and they're leveraged and used by this draft. So it split this up. And we added support for a similar type of, so the immutable extensions was a bunch of extension headers that you're basically saying relays cannot change these. They may read them, but they can't change them. So here we've also in this draft, and I'll explain more on a bit, added some stuff for a similar thing for private extensions that a relay would not be able to change or read. And we've set up a lot more of the procedures for forming inputs and outputs and how this is all set. I would say one of the major things that's still missing from the draft is really a careful security analysis, threat models, and the security sections. There's a ton of work still needed there. So let me get into the chunks of this, of the various things. And one of the problems is we sort of use headers and extensions sort of float around all kinds of ways. And there is, we don't, we're not careful enough sometimes in talking about which ones we mean. So we carry data in the objects, and that whatever goes in the objects is things that's defined by like warp or some higher level application that uses it, and that will have headers. There's no problem. Like, it's fine for that to define extension headers and how they're contained in that object format and what it goes. But the object bits are reserved for the application to define. So the type of thing that we're talking about here is the ones that are a MOQ transport level header. So the things that go in the immutable extensions, for example, are things that are relevant to the MOQ transport in some way or another. So the basic idea here is we have those ones. We also envision that sometime there might be ones that do with the MOQ header that has to do with the MOQ transport that you want to encrypt end-to-end, you don't want the relays to read. There's no good examples of these right now. Like the serialization to wire time is one that's been used in some previous similar sort of protocols. But it's fairly safe to say that there probably will be some eventually, and we probably want to design in from the beginning the ability to have an end-to-end encrypted MOQ extension header if one ever comes up, because it's really hard to backpatch this in later. Now, those headers are getting encrypted at the same time as the immutable ones are getting signed, so you need some way to sort of pass these into the stack, get them to the bottom of the stack where all this security is somewhat happening. So with that, the basic design here is we're authenticating across quite a few things in the object, the group ID, the object ID, some other things, immutable extension, the immutable extensions, and then, of course, all of your text that you were encrypting is also authenticated. We're encrypting the private extension headers, and we're encrypting the payload data that was in the object, which may have other headers and things, extensions inside of it. Now, one of the properties that Richard Barnes raised that he wanted in this is we did not need to reveal how much information was in payload and how much information was in the encrypted header. So they wanted to obfuscate that in the encryption. And that's something that hasn't been done in previous protocols, but does reduce the amount of data we're leaking, and there's no reason not to do it. So that's, when you take those constraints together, that's what drove this design. Let me stop there. Any questions on this? How we sort of got here on this?
I'll join the queue later, but were you saying that you would pad, or just the fact that there's both authenticated and encrypted stuff obscures the length?
This says nothing about pad. Somebody could put in a private extension header that was padding if they wanted.
Inside of the encrypted part.
All we're saying is the two lengths are blurred together and encrypted and put in. So the length 1 and length 2 on this slide are both put inside. That information is in the encrypted ciphertext, and when you decrypt it, you'll be able to decrypt it and figure out which one's headers and undecrypt it back to what you had. But the encrypted version, there's only length 3 is the only thing you get to see in the packet, which is length 1 plus length 2. And whether length 1 included padding or not, it's totally up to whatever happens in there.
Okay.
Or wherever. Yeah.
The typical way you do padding would be to pad to 2 to the something power, and then you'd have even less information. You wouldn't even know what length 3 is.
We can trivially, this spec does not define a padding mechanism like this, but you could easily define an extension header that did exactly that.
It's Will.
Oh, sorry, Will. Oh, I can see who it is up here. Never mind.
Oh, hey, Colin. Can you clarify for me, the application defines the payload, it also defines the private extensions. Why aren't whatever's in private extensions?
No, it does not define the private extensions. So
what are they?
MOQ-T defines the private extensions. The application can define headers that go inside of its objects for sure, and in the payload, no problem with that. So of course, if we're sending some video container format, it would have whatever extensions it defined at that. But the application that uses it gets to use the bits that are in the object payload section. And these so no header that we're looking at today would go in these private extensions. They would all go in the payload section of this, defined by the application that used it. But an example of like the one Rowan was just describing a minute ago would be done, that would be a MOQ-T level extension that would apply to, that could be used by any application that used this thing and had to be done at the MOQ-T layer where it was doing this. That might go in the MOQ-T private extension. So I'm trying to very carefully differentiate private extensions that are MOQ-T private extensions from ones that are warp private extensions. The warp private extensions would go in the
payload, and private extensions are reusable between different applications. That's why they're part of that private. Other applications might use them, because if only one application uses it, it should be in the payload.
Actually, I think it's even more than that. It's things that are used by the MOQ transport. I mean, yes, they could be used by any application that uses MOQ transport, but that's because they're used by MOQ transport in some way.
But they're encrypted, so they can't be used by MOQ transport.
No, it just meant they can be removed. They can be used by the original sender and the end receiver that are doing MOQ transport. So like padding to a power of 256 is an example, or a multiple of 256 bytes would be an example of something that the MOQ transport would provide at an underlying level and would need a header of this type here, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm closing the queue very soon.
Okay, that discussion confused me, but I think I know what you're doing here, so I'm not going to dive into that. But I think we need to have a little understanding of terminology and what we want to put where, so everyone's on the same page. But I think this is fine. I have two quick comments. Number one, I think length 3 here is the actual. It's the MOQ-T payload length that you would find, right? It's like the length of all the blob that comes after the serialized object fields in MOQ-T. It's not a separate field.
No, right. It would be, there's no good way to represent this diagram.
Yeah.
But in the what got sent over the wire, it would be what you just said. In what got sent over the API at the top of this, you wouldn't. You'd see something more like the top of this diagram.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the way I think about the API for this is, I would say like, I want to send this object. Here's my extensions that I don't care about, relay mutable. Here are my mutable extensions. Here are the private extensions that I want encrypted. And here's my payload. Do it, and then it makes this.
That's exactly what I'm proposing.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I think I saw this in the draft too. Is like I don't understand why that type byte is there by length 2. Are you planning to make that an extension point so you can have other feature stuff, or it just wasn't clear to me. If we're only going to have payload and extension values, you could just have the 2 lengths. In the second line.
No, I see what you're doing. I don't know what that's there. Like it's what you'd think. We just need to somehow express right. This is a slide error.
Hi, one quick question. Have we thought about the latency implications of encrypting the payload? Because if we are putting the whole GOP into the payload, then we need to wait until we have, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, we need to wait until we have the whole payload to be able to decode it, to decrypt it. And that means that if we are putting a long GOP into the payload, the player cannot get those bytes until we have the whole GOP. And MOQ, I think one of the main motivations is latency. And this goes absolutely against that.
So look, I've not looked at this recently. I think the way we're using these, if the cipher's AES GCM or AES CBC, I think the answer is yes, we can start sending the data before we've received all the data. But let's open an issue on that and go and check and write about this in the draft. The draft has no text on that, and it definitely should have text on that one way or another.
As long as there are ciphers that I'm not an expert that are streamable, I think that's okay. But if we have to wait for the whole payload of the GOP to be received, I think that's could be a problem.
Yeah. It also has the problem on the decrypt in. Typically, we say you can't decrypt until you can check the auth, and you need the whole thing. So there probably is a latency problem here in that I'm not sure on the sending end, but I suspect on the receiving end, we might have the problem that you need to receive the whole object before you can really decrypt it. So, that comes into maybe how we sequence these and how we think about these. I think it's an issue we should write down in the draft and talk about more.
Okay,
I don't know if there's a solution.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Victor, please be brief.
Yeah, I think there's like a bit of tension between the fact that extensions on MOQT are typically meant to be public for relays, but you also kind of want them to be private. with regarding to thing Georgia said, I do think there's like we need to think hard about this, because on one hand, chunking allows you to like serialize like half of your really big iframe without having to store up like all of it in RAM to encrypt and decrypt at once. But there is also like the opposite risk, is that like if you chunk it into multiple ASGCM blobs, then like now you're vulnerable to truncation attacks.
Okay, the queue is closed. You're basically out of town, Colin, so can you maybe whet our appetites for taking this to another interim or something? And also, can you speak briefly to your intent for this draft, like to integrate it into MOQ or do something else with it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this draft should remain like it is as a sort of standalone draft, because most of the users, a large portion of the MOQ users will not need this technology, right? They won't be doing end-to-end encryption, or they'll be using the CMAF style stuff. So I think it's perfect as an extension like this, and I would like to adopt this draft is my actual very serious thing. I'd like to sort of ask for that going forward. I think that we do need something like this, and this draft is far enough along. It's a good starting point for whatever the working group needs to do. I also, there's a bunch of discussions about, I'm not going to talk about this here, but there's one of the things that was the most significant issue raised is, hey, the way we have SVC layering makes it more complicated to detect lost or missing objects if one of the layers is dropped. And there's good proposals for how to fix this. We'll sort of update that in the next version of the draft. So that's really getting working group adoption so that we can start moving this would be the most important thing to me. And part of this is just like, this is a thing that's, it will get more review if we can get it adopted, and we can also get it to the point where people can start using it to run trials. So, thoughts on that?
Thanks, Colin.
So if you could type the question for. I would like to understand how many has actually read this draft. So we have a few show of hands in the room here. 4, 5, 6. Yeah. I personally, I'm kind of think this is a relevant component for the whole solution. But yeah, I think you might want to update the draft, etc. But I think we'll be positive to going towards adoption fairly soon. But
just there's so few people have read it, it's hard to do at this point. Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
Well, let's have a conversation about maybe talking more about it in a virtual interim.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hello, I'm Lucas. I'm a QLog enthusiast. I'm here today to talk about the MOQ QLog draft. I presented this back in IETF 122, but I'm here today to tell you some more. Hopefully I don't need all of this time. Let's see how we get on. This is draft Mathis and I have been collaborating on for about 6 months now. But yeah, let's get to it. Just a quick reminder, QLog, it's a structured logging protocol for network protocols that the QUIC working group has been working on for a while. We have 3 main schemas there, one called literally the main schema, which sets the groundwork for this extensible framework of logging stuff. And then building on top of that, we have QUIC and HTTP3. This is all defined in something called CDDL, the Common Data Definition Language, I believe. But the important part is that that's kind of this abstract data definition language that then can be serialized into whatever format you might find useful. It does help to define some. So those documents concentrate on just regular plain old JSON and a streaming JSON format, but it's pretty trivial just to use whatever you want. I'm not going to go into this in terrible amounts of detail. Like I said, I did present it at IETF 122. It's literally the same slide. But just to give you a flavor of what these events are, you'll have a log. You could call it a log file, but it doesn't strictly need to be one if you're not logging to a file. But the idea that you have a container that would contain a lot of these events that have a time and a name and then some data. And this is really the crux of where the fun and interesting stuff happens in this extensible data bit, which is, you can see on the right-hand side, we'd say a packet sent event that can contain a packet header and then the frames that would exist within that packet at the QUIC layer. And then some examples JSON serialized at the end just to show a stream frame belonging to stream ID 0 with a particular offset and length. A lot of these events are defined with optional fields, such as whether you need to log them on every line for some kind of form of compression or data saving, but quite often about the privacy or whatever. The metadata is usually enough for the kinds of use cases that QLog is intended for, which is understanding protocol interactions, debugging, etc. You could log payloads if you like, but that odds overhead. I see someone in the queue. Is there a clarifying question? Or
why don't you go ahead till the end?
Huh? So,
please continue to the end.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Thank you. And so effectively, we're just taking that paradigm and doing it for the QLog, working our way through the MOQ-T. Sorry, we're doing it for MOQ-T, working our way through the specification, primarily just focused on what's there, what would be on the wire, say, and finding a way to come up with a common structure for those fields, such that producers can produce things that look very similar, and then tooling and anyone building, say, scripts that analyzes these things can be done once, and maybe we can share it around. Mike talked a bit about interop earlier, but from a QLog perspective, not MOQ, we have Robin Marks's QViz tool, which has been a stalwart of the QUIC working group for a long time, helping analyze things focused on congestion control, handshakes with a sequence diagram, working through that. It handles general events pretty well, but your mileage might vary if that's what you want. Back when we first came up with this idea, like 6 months ago, I was doing some work in the Quiche project, Cloudflare's Quiche. We have a crate that's pretty generic for serialization, deserialization, and it's fairly easy to add MOQ-T support for that. It's not landed due to various kind of unrelated reasons, part of which is it's not an adopted document. We tend not to like to land features for random ideas from random people like me. And then we, on top of that, had some tooling called QLog Dance, which I've talked about for a number of years, but finally we got to open source during the hackathon this weekend, and we're just waiting on some reviews to land that into our mainline. And this is where I think there's a good opportunity to enhance some of its capabilities, crowdsource some of the efforts to have better log analysis, reports, charts to try and find interop issues that we're going to expect. We have a few producers already. Mathis and Lorenzo added support back at IETF 122 time. Mike's been adding some support recently. I think Gwendol did, and various other people have mentioned stuff in the chat, so apologies if I didn't get your name, but what I'm seeing is a lot of uptake for this already, and contributions from the community to keep that document up to date while Mathis and I have been a bit busy over the summer doing other things. So there is overlap with other logging efforts that might have been discussed already, and maybe there's some questions about how much of that gets kind of aggregated into an effort within MOQ. And I'm happy to have some of that discussion. I'm going to skip over this, but this is an example of how you could use some of my tooling to generate more of a consumable output than raw JSON or whatever logging format you might have just hand rolled yourself, which is a very common thing. Adding some capabilities to quickly filter on message types to try and say like, oh, we had an interop issue because you sent a control message with an invalid string in there or whatever. The next steps I'm looking for, as I say, there's lots of producers and consumers that will benefit from an actively maintained spec. These changes are pretty trivial. You normally changing the name of a field or switching it from optional to mandatory. And there's not really that much work to do it, but I kind of feel bad that it's happening in my personal repo and that there's other people doing the work for me, and then I put my name on it. So I want to be involved still. I can really help, but I'd love this to be adopted into the working group to make sure it's collaborative and there's governance and discussion and all of that good thing. That's all I have. Rohan?
Hi, Rowan May. Did you use CDDL because you wanted to be able to support both JSON and CBOR? or only JSON?
This is a question that goes back a few years, back into the QUIC working group. The original kind of working group drafts used a form of like JSON schema-esque / TypeScript oriented definition language, and the feedback we got for that is it's okay, but actually there was, if my memory is correct, interest in defining something that has already extant methods for serialization to different formats. CBOR is an option for sure, but no one I know has asked for that actively. It could be defined fairly straightforwardly in another draft.
Okay,
Well,
so it sounds like the answer is yes, the motivation was that you might do CBOR in the future.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, because otherwise I would say probably go for JSON schema instead. And then the time, that seemed odd to me. Every logging format that I've used before has a date stamp, like a date, date time. What is the time with respect to? Because I saw numbers that were very low there.
Yeah. So there's always, like you say, lots of these things are configurable. We have various different time formats that would be defined in, the log file itself. It would declare what it's using, maybe what its epoch time is. I didn't put those on these slides for brevity, but you've got a lot of examples and material of this.
I can send you some messages privately, but I think you'd be better off having a dedicated timestamp and a relative time that is defined by the application as two separate things, and just be very wary of using floats for times and dates. There are a lot of dragons there.
No, thank you. That's good feedback for the QUIC working group for sure. That level of detail is in the core specification. So anything that a MOQ schema definition would pick up would just rely on that.
Okay, I'm going to lock the queue soon. Christian, you're next. Let's try to keep these discussions a little shorter so you can ask the adoption questions.
Yeah, one question is, what does that do for streaming the log?
For what? Sorry, the audio wasn't.
Well, one of the big issue we have with QLog is choosing JSON was that you had to add the right number of closing brackets at the end, otherwise you can't read it. And someone is speaking there.
Okay, we're short on time. If you recall, Christian, we resolved this issue about 3 or 4 years ago by adopting a JSON-sec IETF RFC for streaming JSON.
So we do the same thing for MOQ.
Yeah, well, it's up to whoever wants to produce their logs, whether they want to stream it or not. But yeah, that's why we have those two formats.
Okay.
Alan Frindell, just in terms of, we're going to talk about adoption, I think it makes sense for this working group to have this as our spec is moving quickly, and we would benefit from this. And so it makes sense to be owned here. It can't be owned by the people who are primarily authoring and editing MOQ-T, because that is already a crap ton of work. So if we're going to bring it in, I want someone to raise their hand high and be like, I am going to keep that up to date with every MOQ-T version as it goes. So think about it.
Okay, we can start with the warm-up question of who has read any version of the draft. Well, please use the tool. No, it's ongoing. So, okay, see if the number's still moving.
I'm still trying to connect to the tool. I mean, I was in.
Yeah, but it's, have you read it, Colin?
I got to it.
Okay, I think we can end this part but it's 9 has answered yes and 21 no's. So that's at least positive that some had read it. So prefacing this adoption question, I think Alan's question was a good one. The other aspect of this is that it's not super clear to me that the charter of the working group allows us to adopt it. We will have to have a discussion with our AD about adopting it. I think it's like these operational aspects of it and being able to log it and is good things, but we need to agree on this and see if we actually need to include this in the short revision or how to deal with it. So, but I do want to poll now the working group on how many support set adoption. So we will have that data with us when we speak with AD.
I just have a clarification question. Did we get an answer to Alan's question?
No. So I think this is another aspect of asking someone is willing to step up as an editor of the, or a couple of that's willing to step up as an editor too.
To me, that's the most important question right now.
So obviously, sort of the start of the adoption call process. So we'll take this to the list. So I think we have about 2 weeks for someone to step up. And I think if we get a positive thing, but nobody steps up, I think the chairs will take that into consideration.
So I find it interesting that more people support adoption than have read the draft.
That, in my view, is not an uncommon occurrence at IETF.
Cool.
Thanks.
So we're terminating the poll. It's 25 yes, 2 no's, and 7 no opinions.
Ian's up next. He's going to talk about extensibility and then about stream mappings. Although, Ian, I mean, you're taking us to the break. We have 28 minutes. I am happy for you to split that time as you see fit. So if you just want to use it all for this, that's great. Or whatever you think is appropriate.
I would rather not use it all for this, but I will if I need to. I think is probably the answer, unless it's obvious where we're just like post-holing and like not making progress.
It's all your time. Do as you see fit.
So we've talked about this before. Here's a link to all the open issues that have extensibility tagged. Colin and I had a good chat yesterday. I think it's a continuation of a lot of conversations and PRs that have been written. I think, oh, these are the old slides. Didn't you? You accepted the new ones. Oh, my. Yeah, probably. At least I think you accepted the new ones. Oh. There are a number of open issues, but I mean, I can start. Okay. I don't have very many slides, so I want to make sure they're not confusing, because this is a topic that has occasionally caused confusion in the past. Okay. 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 Well, you have anyway. Okay. I'll start. You actually had the original like in Google. Just present. Okay. Let's start with the high-level principles that are, are not changed between the slides. So I think critical parameters that you really need to be parsed, right? So max cache duration, a new filter extension is a great example. If you think the peer supports a new filter extension and you use it, having them ignore it is going to go very poorly, right? Like this is, but we can negotiate these things in setup. It's fairly straightforward. This is sort of like if you were to make an RPC and then add an extra argument and the other person was like, I don't know, the rest of this looks fine, so I'm just going to ignore your extra argument. Like that's not going to go well, probably. Like it's very much, I would say that that's a reasonable analogy. Yep, perfect. Yep, I can tell. Wire format efficiency is not a priority, but some protocols, I guess, in some SIP as an example, have been hurt by endpoints that claim to support things that they didn't actually support, causing interoperability and unpredictable behavior. Extensibility, in contrast, for QUIC has actually gone relatively well. Like I'm not aware of a ton of like weird issues, and that's partially because you do have to negotiate things in the handshake, and then if you try to use like a frame type that you didn't negotiate, it just doesn't work. Like the whole thing explodes. So it's quite easy to like tell if someone's made an error in most cases. There is some sort of need for like extensibility where you on the track level. I think just 2 days ago, I kind of talked about like, imagine you wanted to have an average track bitrate to use for server-side ADR. It seems like something like that is probably going to be useful on some layer of media over QUIC. One can imagine path debug info, so on and so forth. So like, we can call these metadata, or I think on the next slide, I call them properties. There's a slide on what they should be called. But the point is, these are like sort of more the headers, the HB headers, or the object extension headers of messages. Next slide. All right. So the proposal is to add something called, I call it parameters here. You have to negotiate all new parameters, message types, new fetch headers. Like there's a few issues that are like, how do I negotiate X? And the answer is, you got to negotiate it in setup. Because not correctly interpreting a new stream type or something is going to like go terribly. You can add track properties to provide this header-like extensibility on publish, subscribe OK, or fetch OK. So basically things that flow downstream. Yeah, they're now just object extension headers and have similar properties. Similar object extension headers, the proposal would be that you can skip them. So if you're an intermediary and you're like, I'm not, like, I don't, I just want to be passed through, then just like object extension headers, there'll be a link there and you can just skip over them. So the proposal is to use basically the same formatting, but you should cache these for the future. So if you do 2 subscriptions, or you get 2 subscriptions, the second one gets the same properties as the first in response. And parameters that need to be respected and also passed along, like max cache duration, need to specify like how they get passed along. So there might be some details here, but that's sort of what we do today. Even new group request is actually a reverse case of this, where it's a parameter you sort of like have to understand and you have to like go up the chain. But most of the ones I think of interest are probably like down, flowing downstream. Alan already wrote kind of a PR of sketching out approximately what this might look like for the parameter change, not for the properties change. There might be some details that are different, but it's quite similar. So this is the high level, and the only other slide is on naming. Do we want to call them properties or metadata or something else? I admit that having 2 words that starts with a P occasionally got me hung up. But maybe like this is like Sesame Street and I just need to use more P words. I don't know. All right, let's go back one. Does the working group feel like this is a good direction and we should write another PR for properties / metadata / whatever we decide to call it, as well as like doing any back and forth on 1285 and then go in this direction? Or are there concerns about this direction? Ted.
Ted Hardy, not a concern, just a question to make sure I understand. So if in the course of things you need to update any of the extensibility in the first line, you have to go back to setup. There's no presumption that you would be able to do this during the course of an ongoing
session.
Session.
No, in the same way that like you can't negotiate like quick receive timestamps in the middle of a
Okay.
session. Yep.
So in that instance, I think going in this way, the difficult, I think it's kind of basically heading in the right direction, but I think one of the things you're going to have to draw out in the document when you get there is which ones go in that category and which ones are header-like extensibility, because the figuring out which ones those are, because the header-like extensibility you actually could introduce, at least in my understanding, midstream, and making that really crisp as which goes into which category is going to be a lot of the doc work, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree. Alan, or sorry, who's?
It's me.
I'll let you do queue management.
Alan Frindell. So I think I like this direction. I think, you know, I've sketched out a few different PRs that I think all mesh well with where this is headed. So I don't know that those PRs may or may not be the best place to start to actually write this down, but I think it's right. On the parameter thing, I just want to make it clear, like the current text, I think, says you can ignore unknown parameters, but that's going to change. It's going to be, if you see a parameter that you do not know about, connection closed, game over.
Yep.
Permanent lifetime ban.
That, I think that 1285 year PR changes that as well. Not to say we would exactly use 1285, but you do change that, right?
I write many PRs.
Yeah.
I have no idea what it says.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Anyway, I just read.
So I think that's good. I like the property concept. When I went back and looked at the PR that I wrote for there, what I had done originally was I took extension headers as defined for objects and I lifted that. And so instead I called them track extensions. And so do we want to have parameters, properties, and extensions, or would we want to change what we currently call header extensions to object properties? And if we have track properties and object properties, I don't know. I'm not answering. Property seems like a fine name to answer your naming question.
I don't like the word extension and header in the same word because it's not really an extension. It's just like some data you stick on an object that might not change its behavior whatsoever, but that's a personal net and probably not relevant to this conversation.
But I think one thing you didn't point out here necessarily is that properties are, you don't have to understand them.
You can skip the whole thing.
Yeah, the publisher
like literally like there's a link at the beginning, just like object extension headers, just skip them.
Yeah,
nope.
Exactly.
That's the whole point
the publisher can add anything they want.
The relay network will still work if every single relay on the path skips all of them. Yeah. Like that should be true. And
must cache.
And if it's not true, then like you probably should be using a parameter. Yep.
I'm sorry. Would you like me to lock the queue so you have time for your other presentation, or do you want to drive this to conclusion?
I think we're getting. Why don't you lock the queue tentatively, and then if it seems like we need more time, then we'll extend it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Mo, I don't have a strong opinion on the parameters negotiation part, but I do support having track level properties. And I think it may be a good idea to rename our object extension headers to just object properties and then move the some of them up to track level if they apply to the entire track. I think that'd be a nice clean separation. I think that should be done independently of whatever we decide for parameters being negotiated or not.
Yeah. I will add that probably like the addition of parameters probably makes some of the use cases you've talked about 2 days ago more compelling potentially. Yeah. Will.
Yeah, so +1 on object properties and track properties. That makes a lot of intuitive sense. But the decoupled problem is this negotiating of new parameters at connection time. We already negotiate the version, right? And at what point is the version that you're negotiating a bucket of defined parameters, message types, and required behaviors? It would seem to me that if we allow multiple versions and constrain that, we can have a much simpler negotiation during setup. I worry about the complexity of negotiating the version and then a whole bunch of other parameters. There's a matrix there that gets large.
So I think that's a great question, Will. I think, so how I see this is I can imagine, say there being a special version for warp, for example, because it's like maybe an extra set of functionality or a set of extensions that like all like work together well. And like you sort of would like all of them to work together well and you require all of them. But in general, like my experience with QUIC is like doing them one by one has been totally fine, right? And the cases it's not totally fine is a very specific use case. Like I'm trying to run Goog CC or some like, delay-based congestion controller over QUIC, and I really need receive timestamps. So I literally just hard code in that like I'm going to send them even if the peer doesn't support it because like the application doesn't work. So I think we can use the version because, as you said, sometimes the version is an indication of a set of parameters that are negotiated or a set of features that are negotiated. But I think most of the time, the composability aspect of making them separately negotiated has worked out fine in my experience.
I was just going to say that what I think is the key insight to this draft that we need agreement on the room today is separating these things that were previous parameters into two different categories of properties and parameters. It doesn't matter what we name them. All the naming can be sorted out by the editors, but having these two categories, I think, really cleans up the logic and makes it much easier to think and separate these things, and it makes it instantly clear how to deal with both of them as well. So I really like this.
Thanks. Okay. Next slides then. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for giving me time to do
So
that.
just to conclude on this, I hear very positive, and I assume PR is the next step here for the extensions.
Yep. Yes, would have liked to have had it for today, but time permitting. Okay. Which version of slides is this? I think it's the one yesterday. Oh, it should be the right thumb? Okay. This is pretty old. Okay. This is like V1. Sorry. I think it's, yeah. In the interest of getting slides in relatively early that were close, I think I submitted like 3 versions of this, so sorry. But yes, Alan did object to the title slide originally, so it was replaced. It is actually a better title slide. Okay, we're going to talk about MOQ control streams. Formerly it was called MOQ stream usage, but Alan noted that we're not really talking about changing how objects are transported at all in these slides. We're only talking about really control messages. So there are some open issues. There's some issues with request ID, in particular around like how it's very easy to burn through quite a number of them for things like subscribe, update, and publish namespace. It'd be, in my opinion, it'd be nice to be able to like quickly cancel a like subscription or fetch or something without like the headline blocking problem of going on the control stream, particularly in the context of the first issue. Though if you fix the first issue, that second issue gets better. Alan wrote a nice PR called request update that just allows you to update anything. That sort of like just makes all of this conceptually simpler. It's not technically required, but it's sort of nice. When headline blocking is helpful, it makes sense to put messages on a bidirectional stream, but sometimes it's not helpful. So let's talk about that. And it'd be nice to use the existing quick stream and data flow control. And ideally, in someday, we can remove request ID, but at least the initial PR, like I have, does not do that. So the issue we talked about most recently in the virtual interim was subscribe namespace and publish namespace, and how like you could very, very quickly run out of request IDs in that circumstance. We also talked, I think Luke originally brought up, and then subsequently other people discussed the fact that when you do subscribe namespace, really all the published namespace is in response. Like you shouldn't have to specify the full namespace. You should only really have to specify the suffix. But the way it's spelled on the wire today, that's not really practical. Oh, did. Oh, okay. Never mind. Alan said that the first use of published namespace in this slide should be subscribe namespace. I changed it in the title, but I forgot on the very first bullet that put publish namespace on its own stream. That should be put subscribe namespace on its own stream. There's basically, instead of publish namespace, there's a variant of publish namespace and publish namespace done that are optimized to be on the response stream. Again, they only include the namespace suffix. They drop parameters, so you can't do like auth or anything with it. It's just like you get what you get. The idea is if these are all requested from, say, a relay, really what you're doing is sort of dumping the relay's cache of like, this is the world I know about in this namespace. Here's what you got. Oh. Okay, I can try to upload them again. I think I don't know. Okay. Okay. So the inefficiency issue, it fixes the inefficiency issue of like repeating the prefix over and over again unnecessarily. Trying to think, like it fixes 1168, which is this issue of using a lot of request IDs by removing request ID from published namespace. It removes unsubscribed namespace entirely and just replaces it with like you close the stream. It also allows the publisher to cancel a subscribed namespace, which as Martin pointed out right today, there's actually no way for a publisher to cancel the subscribed namespace, right? Yeah, it's like only the person who initiated it can cancel it, which is sort of an oops, but I think it's an oversight, but this simply solves that problem too. So this PR is up. It's at this point relatively reasonable looking. It's not a huge increase in text at all. But we could also put other requests on bidirectional streams if we want to. We can move subscribe, publish, fetch, as well as subscribe namespace. We've kind of talked about this on and off before. I think there are more issues open now that like motivate like potentially doing this, particularly the issues around like burning through a lot of request IDs for subscribe, update, and such. But the idea would be hopefully to get rid of request IDs or at least use them much less frequently. The intent, at least initially, would be to not change object transmission. I don't know. Oh, I shouldn't say publish. I fixed that in the most recent slides too. Sorry. But to not change object transmission. And I say that with an asterisk, which is we could put response objects to a fetch in the response stream if we wanted. We can decide that as a group, like if we look at the PR and see what we like. But like at a high level, this is really about control messages. So in this world, request ID would no longer limit how many request updates you have. So that could be a resource concern. However, you still do have limits. You have flow control in the stream. You can bulk read and process multiple request updates at once. So if someone sends you 100, you can basically like run through all of them at once and make only like one change. So there are optimizations like that you can do to sort of limit any potential DOS issues. And you can always reset the stream at the quick layer without affecting any other subscription, which is sort of a nice property. So the independence here is a lot of like, especially as a kind of a load balancer, like a lot of what I like about moving them to separate streams is it makes, the back end or the people who I'm serving on the front not be kind of head of line blocked on the back end because, one person's doing something silly with their subscription. So, do you want to go now? Oh.
Just a brief question. So the only thing remaining on the control stream is set up and go away. Is that correct?
I think so. Technically, publish namespace, the full version with parameters, unless we do something else, would remain there.
Why wouldn't that be in the subscribe namespace stream?
So that's a question I think we should. I mean, we can talk about today, which is, do we want to retain unsolicited publish namespace? And in the last virtual interim, we said, yes, we do. So I was going to stick with that conclusion for now and like happy to revisit it, but like it is kind of annoying in ways, but it's also not the end of the world.
Alan from Dell, why wouldn't unsolicited publish namespace in your proposal also go on its own BiDi stream? Because it
could.
Yeah, no, it should. I mean, if you're going to go this way, go this way.
Sure.
Are you done? I mean, I have other comments too, but if this clarifying question.
No, this is the last slide. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just go back to the request update slide real quick.
This one?
No, the one. No. The one that said what we lose about request updates. Oh, it's not this one. Previous one.
No. Again,
This one. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think everything you're saying here, if you replace like request update with like, I don't know, some HTTP2 control message, it's still true. So this is like, you can flow control HTTP2 and you can like bulk process priority tree updates and stuff, but it's still a huge problem. So I think we still need a solution to this that's not some mechanical solution to like somebody like opening a subscription and then sending 1 million request updates just to make to DOS the server and make sure that we really have a story there that works. So
Okay.
And like,
You want something more complex than just don't read?
yeah, because then you can't find the unsubscribe or like.
No, I can, because I can nuke the stream.
Nuke it.
So I
All
can
right.
unsubscribe. So that's
we need to think more about.
Yeah,
this.
no, I
Maybe,
agree.
You may be right, but
at the very least, we need like
I'm quite
security
concerned.
deployment considerations. And probably more.
Control message attacks are like super popular, and so we need to make sure that we don't like if we have an oops, someone's got to find it. So that's one thought. The other, like generally, like overall, like I think this. So with the subscribe namespace PR solves a bunch of problems, and I think people should go review it, and we should land it regardless of what we do. So the real question is like, what do we do about the rest of the messages?
Yep.
I think your design is like fairly sane. It's also a very big change for MOQ. We've had a single control stream for a long time. It does introduce problems with joining fetch. I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but like that has a reference to a subscription that's already been received. And so now there's blocking that happens if that gets reordered.
Oh, I forgot. Okay.
So we have 5 minutes left of the session.
So I think it's an okay direction, but it's going to add like, I think probably 4 months or something to our, like if we switch to this, like the end, our milestone's going to move. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of change for people. So.
Yeah.
So Haas, I'll try to be quick. The unsolicited published namespace is needed. That helps in the routing and other things. How we do it on the wire, I'm okay with options. And second thing is that for subscribe namespace, having a control stream is a good idea because it's the ongoing data that's keep coming, and it's nice to have a property that self-manages itself. And for the other things in general, I am okay with the idea, but one concern is that like if I have 1,000 subscribes or 10,000 subscribes, then I have so many bidirectional streams I need to manage versus where we have one. One has a property of have head of line blocking because you have to have all on one control stream versus this 1,000. It's parallel, but it's a different place where you're spending resources on. No, I'm not thought through fully, but in general, it seems fine for me.
Thanks.
Mo, I like this direction a lot. I think we should be using the quick mechanisms that are available, and I think we're sorely underusing them today, and this helps push us back in the right direction. On the question of whether or not this is going to delay things too long, I think the proof of concept, if we can get that, finalized within like 2 or 3, weeks or before the next interim, and then have a good decision point. Hey, this worked really well for a really complex message, for a really complex control message. Let's see if we can use it to the other complex control message. I think if we iterate on that really quickly, it wouldn't necessarily be many months of work. And the main thing I like about it is that I hate the current way in the current draft. If any one little thing goes wrong, the entire connection is blown, and you don't realize what that does to relays that are large and have a connection that's sustaining thousands of subscriptions. This would give us the option to have errors bounded to that particular message if we want. We don't have to terminate the entire connection. You can say this transaction is kaput.
Yep. Thanks, Mo. But I agree on timing. I think the current subscribe namespace PR is getting pretty close to landable, actually. Minus like it needs a little bit more review, but it's pretty close. So that's a good first step. And I was probably going to tackle fetch next because actually I think that's maybe the next most straightforward. And then yeah, we just need to sort the joining fetch issue, I guess. So, but thank you, everyone. Oh, Victor.
Victor Vasiliev, huge, large MOQ refactor enthusiast. I think from my personal experience, I think you really should very carefully write out like what happens with every individual message and like message flow. Because like this is good, like in theory, but like there are things like publish in response to subscribe namespace and joining fetch, where they're like kind of one-to-one mapping does not quite work. And you should really figure out what happens in those, especially like in subscribe namespace, because like if you want to tie a subscription to a stream, that sounds nice, but what does it mean if that subscription originated from a subscribe namespace? What happened? How does the state management looks in that scenario? So like my short feedback is make sure you have like it fully thought out. Because you might like notice that there is a major problem. And also, as a side note, this reminds me a lot of QUIC and QUIC header stream, which used to exist and now that no longer exists.
Oh yeah, quick header stream. Wow, yeah. Stream 0. I don't know. Anyway, Colin.
I mean, I like everyone. I think I sort of I like the general direction of this, and it looks really interesting to dig down into. But I think I'm going to try. I read the slides a few days ago and read them again now, and I don't have my head around this at all yet, and what all the implications are. And particularly, I don't know that this is going to make things any better for DOS preventions of various types, or maybe it will. I just like it's like I feel like what's going to really push us for this being definitely a win or not a great idea is all going to be in that space, and we need to dig into how this, how the details of this all look, and then particularly on some of the DOS flows. And I think it'll become suddenly much easier, much easier to reason about this and very strongly one way or another. So I encourage you to keep working on it. And thank you. I'll help.
Thanks. Mike and I in parallel started talking about DOS and resource management issues and concerns yesterday, and have so that's an ongoing discussion kind of in parallel. And I think ideally we'd get that resolved before we go past the subscribe namespace PR that's already outstanding, right? or at least a straw man resolved. Yeah.
Okay. I think you got some feedback here. I think we'll have to revisit this probably in the virtual interview at the higher detail level. Maybe work out some of the Victor asked for and these other considerations, as well as starting writing on a PR, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think I have a good direction. I think, yeah, I want to continue working with Mike and others on resource management, because I think everyone kind of wants a more thorough review of that. And Alan obviously has thoughts on request update, which I think, yeah, those are definitely valid concerns. So.
All right, thank you, Ian. We had a really packed schedule. There's a lot of subjects that did not have the time they deserved. So I'm going to send out an email request with agenda requests for our next couple of virtual interims to maybe cover some of the topics that we couldn't get to or didn't have enough time to really fully, explore today or on Tuesday. We will see many of you in the virtual interim in about 10 days. We will see many more of you in Boulder, and the rest of you either in Shenzhen or Vienna, depending on an announcement which will be coming from the chairs in the next 3 weeks or so. And with that, have a good rest of your trip. I'm sorry. One last announcement. Mike English has settled us on a interop date that will be Wednesday, December 10th. That will be a remote interop where you can test your draft 15. Are we still sticking with draft 15, or are people calling uncle? Jordy wants 14. Let's have a conversation about this on the, can you start a conversation on the list about how we want to proceed? And there will be a forthcoming announcement. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your week. I want to destroy. I want to delete messages wherever I can. Oh, you want to get rid of it? I want to get rid of request error, and I don't care about the reason phase really. So being able to use reset stream would be amazing, but this stupid this thing I just did
Oh, I'm saying we should servers like it can reset stream and stop sending. Or is it an HTTP message that says
29 retract. Sort of distract.
Well, we could actually.
So request here is still valid. You have to have request here anyway. Why? So you can tell the error code, well, you're saying the error.
I'm told that nothing ever good.
No, like everything good.